Hey everyone, if you're watching, you might notice that we're all here in different clothes prior to the rest of the episode. We recorded this one recently to highlight a first builder that spent almost 2 decades at Google building systems from scratch in the early days.
Yes, this is recorded before our guest, Lina Scroggins, was announced to be the SVP and Chief Product Officer of Mercy, a regional health system located in the Mid South and one of the 15 largest health systems in the US.
Just goes to show these first builders are moving so fast that we can't even keep up with their moves with our podcast episodes. But really, Lina, this is a huge win for Mercy. So tell us a little bit more about your role and what the goals are there that you're going to be thinking about.
Mercy is one of the 15 largest health systems in the US. It's regional, so it serves communities in the Illinois, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma states. And they are really excited about transforming the patient experience in healthcare. And they believe that consumer facing technology that integrates well with technology used by providers in clinics and hospitals is key to that good experience. So over the last 10 years, they've worked really hard to streamline infrastructure, strengthen infrastructure, prepare their data and their clinical teams. And we're looking for a product leader to bring it all together under a unified vision and strategy that ties it all together and delivers that better experience that consumers are craving for. And so my role is going to be to do that. And it's a really exciting opportunity because this is a faith-based regional healthcare system serving rural America. Most of their locations are not in large cities, although they're headquartered in St. Louis. This is a rural healthcare system serving the most underserved populations. And they believe that technology is at the core of what they can offer and the great experience that they can offer.
I'm really excited that you guys are really thinking about the middle of America at Mercy, and this could not be more needed. I know you're in Bentonville, Arkansas. So can you tell me a little bit more about the connection there with Mercy as well?
First of all, I'm a patient of Mercy, so my family and I get our health care. The brand is well known to us as a family, and it's kind of a mainstay of the Northwest Arkansas area. But I met the leadership team actually at a local healthcare event put on by the newest medical school in the United States. So this past summer, the Alice Walton School of Medicine opened its doors its first school of medical students, and founded by Alice Walton, who's the daughter of Sam Walton, who founded Walmart. This medical school wants to do healthcare differently. So they believe in healthcare and wellness care. And they are going to train their medical students to both take care of their patients with the most innovative, cutting edge technologies and also take care of themselves as caregivers and human beings. So the campus is headquartered in Bentonville amid nature and near a world-class art museum. And Mercy was chosen to be the medical school's clinical training partner. So when I met the leadership team of Mercy at a symposium that the School of Medicine organized in the fall to commemorate the opening of the medical school, and we got to talking about it was in that context that we started talking about healthcare and the role that technology can play in improving healthcare, and not just improving healthcare, but also building wellness. I was really excited that all of the stars seem to be aligning for this role and with my interests and interest in making an impact. Healthcare, Bentonville, and technology.
It's awesome. I can't wait to see you thrive in this role. And I love that they're really bringing someone to really unify all of that together under the health system. You know, obviously health tech and healthcare is very near and dear to me. And so really excited to see more of these types of roles in health systems, like Mercy. So congrats again. And for everyone else tuning in, please enjoy the rest of the episode as we dig in deeper to Lina's first builder career.
Welcome to First Builders, the podcast for those who shape companies from the ground up.
I'm Amber Illig, founder and general partner at the Council Capital, where we invest in early teams solving critical problems in essential industries.
I'm Rachel Tsui, partner at the Council. Today's guest is someone who's been quietly building those systems for nearly 2 decades inside one of the most complex organizations in the world.
We're joined by Lina Scroggins, a true systems thinker and early Google program leader who helped shape the connective tissue behind products like Chrome OS, Google Health, and Cloud for Healthcare.
She's spent her career turning abstract goals into operational reality, aligning engineers, legal teams, and business leaders to develop and deliver impact at scale. And now, as an LP at the Council Fund and advisors to early startups, she's helping founders do the same.
Lina, welcome to First Builders.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's dive right in. So 17 years at Google is rare, especially in tech. What first drew you there, and what was kind of the state of Google when you joined? And then what made you stay through so many phases of growth?
So I joined Google in 2007. I was a mid-sized company at the time, and I was on a break from graduate school. I just finished a master's degree in clinical psychology from WashU in St. Louis. And I just moved to California to be closer to my boyfriend, now husband. He was in graduate school at Berkeley at the time. When I got there and was thinking about what it is that I wanted to do with the majority of my time during the day, I asked myself a couple of questions. What is the Bay Area good at? The answer to that was pretty easy: tech. And what is the best company in the world doing tech at the time? And the answer to that question was Google. And so I did what all of the career advice books tell you not to do. I submitted my resume for a role through Google's careers website, and an entrance exam, 11 interviews, and 5 months later got the job.
Wow.
Yep. So my initial role was to be an administrative assistant for Google's first engineering director of information security. His name was Eric Gross, and he had a team of 100 security engineers whose job it was to protect Google from outside bad actor attacks. And my role there involved everything from managing schedules and calendars and expense reports to designing surveys of Google's employees to understand how they use remote access, how they connect to Google's network from home, and using statistical analysis to determine whether there were statistically significant differences. So the job was really unique in that I had the ability to work on a variety of things, and with a really smart, passionate group of people. It's also where I learned how important information security is and how to create a really strong password.
Wow. Well, first of all, I love that you came in cold and you got the job. And second of all, I can't believe their process was still so long, even back in 2007. It must be deeply ingrained in the culture, because I've had multiple friends go through the months and months of interviewing to get the job at Google. So that's awesome. But yeah, and then it's awesome to hear that your job had such a range, like, from the EA responsibilities to all the way through actually running programs and designing programs. And we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my next role at Google, I got on the one hand, it was organic, but on the other hand, it was intentionally designed. So after a few months, I was asked to support not just the engineering director of the security team, but also the engineering director of a new project called Chrome OS. And in working with him, this was probably about 2008, 2009, discovered that there was going to be a really interesting product that the company was going to develop, an offshoot of the Chrome OS browser, but instead of being one of a number of pieces of software on users' computers, it was going to be the only piece of software on a user's computer. So that team was a small group of 30 engineers at the time, but in the process of developing this operating system for our computer, they started buying a lot of computers, right? Different kinds of computers, so that they could test how well the browser worked on, different types of hardware, different components, because the goal of the project was to make the computers faster, more secure, and really simple, easy to use. So I saw that that there was a lot of money being spent on hardware and a lot of activity happening with engineers changing devices, swapping devices, and really realized that more could be done to kind of organize that space. And
Mhm.
so over the course of a couple of months, pitched the team, and in particular the VP of engineering of the project, Linus Epson, on creating a role, an operator role, a program manager role, to run all of the processes that underpinned the buying of the hardware and the shipping of the hardware and the managing of the inventory once engineers received it. And that was the beginning of my time in what I call working at Google's at a well-funded startup, the Chrome OS team, because that's what it felt like in the day, right? It was a
Yeah.
group of small, nimble engineers that really wanted to do something different. They were using existing technology to experiment, and they had the freedom and the ability to do that. And that grew into the Chromebook series of products, which is the number one computing system used by schools in the US today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to kind of double click on how you actually saw this problem, right? And then chose to like kind of pitch yourself as, hey, we need someone to really organize this, think about this from a systematic perspective. What was it that, was there like a spark or a particular aspect that you were like, hey, this is sorely needed? And why did that role not exist yet before for this group or this team?
That's a great question. I think really how I realized it was, I mean, I was working among these engineers, right? So I was a member of the team. I sat in their space and I saw that they were using these products and exchanging them with each other, right? They were talking about different versions of software being on one piece of hardware or the other. So that was kind of what I observed at a tactical level. But then at a strategic level, the leaders of the team were talking about grand visions and bold visions of being the enterprise hardware solution, right, for the world or for schools. And they were talking about working with multiple OEMs to manufacture the right kind of hardware. And maybe it was just being the systems thinker. It was really, it seemed obvious to me that if you want to do something big with a lot of little pieces of things or a lot of stuff, you're better off organizing it early, because there is a cost element to all of that activity. Buying the hardware is a huge investment. So you want to make sure that the hardware that you buy is used well, because there was a lot of variety in the software flavors that were on the devices, but that was an important piece of information to the engineers. They wanted to make sure that it was the right software with the right device. You could lose a lot of time if you didn't know ahead of time, right? When you picked up a device, what it was. So to me, all of these activities were coming through in a kind of disorganized, haphazard,
Yeah.
afterthought kind of a way.
Reactive
And
instead of proactive, right?
exactly. And I could just see in the future there being, right, a lot of wasted money or a lot of wasted time or really frustrated
Mm.
engineers. And so because I was interested in solving problems, I just started doing it. And when it became clear that this was only going to get bigger and more, that was when I decided I wanted to do it full time.
Yeah.
But nobody was asking me to do it full time. So I thought, well, maybe I'll ask them, see if they agree.
I wonder if your psychology background like also played into this. You were saying like one of the things that you just said that I wanted to point back to was, well, the engineers were going to get really unhappy because of how disorganized everything was. And that was going to end up being a bad outcome for everyone, right? And then people are not going to be as productive, create the things and be creative in that way. And I'm sure there's probably some elements of that, right? Just like the environments that people were, not potentially thriving in, essentially.
And also the fact that my training was in academics, right? The scientific method and research, and understanding, keeping track of details, right? Variables was really important so that you can isolate one variable from another and actually test cause and effect. I think that also made me realize that, well, these details about software version number X or hardware piece of hardware Y are important. And if it's easy to collect this information and make it obvious, on the device ahead of time, for example, through a sticker, let's do that now, as opposed to later, right? When you're wondering and looking up, you need a lot of clicks or a lot of handling of the hardware to get at that. I'm a big believer in doing work up front to plan and organize so that later, when you're focused on something else, you're focused on building or delivering or problem solving something else, you don't have to worry about that. That information is really easily accessible.
Yeah, this is really fascinating because you're talking about seeing this need back in, like you said, 2009, I think, is when you
Yep,
started making
around
this
that time.
transition. By the time I moved into consumer electronics in 2015, this was considered like absolute table stakes. You can't go into like a development build not knowing what hardware has what software on it and like all the different SKU flavors and stuff. And just for our listeners, I mean, Lina said it herself, it's extremely expensive to run these development builds and to do even like a small pilot run thinking you might sell a product. And if it's unorganized and it doesn't go well, it's absolutely terrible for the organization. So that's really cool that you saw the opportunity, and what you saw as like, an empty role that didn't exist is probably now replicated across Silicon Valley. So it's really cool.
Oh, yeah. It's fun. As I moved on at Google to other roles, I kept in touch with the folks who were on my team there. So I started as one program manager in this space, but at its largest, the team was 9. We were 9 full-time program managers all around the world, right? We had somebody in India, we had somebody in
Cool.
we were eventually running the whole supply chain, right? So if you can imagine everything from procurement to end of life for a piece of hardware. And this was on a team that was very software first or software focused and product focused. There were teams at Google that were building data centers, and they had infrastructure and supply chain teams there, but there was nobody around me working on this space. And that was what was really interesting. I ended up finding mentors in Google's official real supply chain team who helped me identify problems and put names to problems and gave me book recommendations so that I could learn as I go. But what was super exciting and nerve-wracking at the time was that, yeah, I was it, right? And I was building it kind of from the ground up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, when you're inside of a huge company, it's easy to feel kind of far from the builder energy of a startup. And it seems like when you joined Google, it was kind of a medium-sized company, but I imagine it grew quite tremendously as you were there. Did you feel like there was a point in time where the way that you could get something done kind of shifted?
It did. It did. I think Chrome OS was a really unique team at a unique time in the group, in the company's history, and so I feel very privileged to have stumbled into that and had the opportunity to learn so much from that well-funded startup opportunity. As the company grew, things did get more complex, right? Budgets became tighter.
Of course.
The number of people and teams that you needed to coordinate to get an innovative project done and out the door grew. And so that became harder.
Yeah. I mean, all that makes sense, right? Like you're in this scale phase where the company still wants to be agile and still wants to be
Mhm.
innovative. But that balance can be really tricky to navigate. And so I'm curious, like for you, how did you start thinking about, programs or projects that were ready for scale versus the ones that needed to still kind of like have that innovative or nimble mindset? Do you distinguish those where, did it kind of depend on the overall strategy or yeah, how did you think about that?
So I don't think I had a word for it or a way of thinking about it as I was working at Google, or at least not in the early days. In the early days, I wanted to work on interesting projects with interesting people and interesting teams. And I would stay there for as long as, right, it made sense, right? I was learning things and I was having an impact on that organization. It's only in the last couple of years when I've been doing a lot of reflecting on my 17-year career at Google that I noticed that I had a pattern and that there are different kinds of systems and different ways to build systems. A really large, complex system requires a different way of thinking and working than a small, chaotic, nimble team or system. And there is a need for both, right? But where I think my skills are best suited for and what is most interesting to me are those early stage systems where you have a small group of people, visionaries, right, with the interesting idea, and they're so driven by that idea that they're not spending a lot of time thinking about the implementation or turning well, they are spending time thinking about how to turn that idea into reality, but they're thinking about the thing. They're not thinking about the process by which it gets built. Um, it's hard to communicate about what you're doing at that time. It's very cross-functional because you need a variety of people and perspectives to build something new and then to get it out the door. When you are at a more scaled system, you have teams working in the same function, right? Like dozens of people, hundreds of people working in procurement or finance or hardware management. Whereas if you're in a small early stage team, the number of people is a lot fewer. So you have less support, but you also have more opportunity to learn and have impact, I think. And so it was um, around the time that the Chrome OS team was starting to navigate its relationship with the Android operating system. So Google had two operating systems that people were wondering, oh, are they going to compete? What's going to happen? It was at that time that I decided, okay, let's go try something new. And that's how I ended up on a kind of a different path, different team.
You also worked really deeply in healthcare initiatives at Google. We'd love to hear more about that and what those sort of experiences taught you about building for sort of high stakes, highly regulated environments.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was around the time that I was kind of leaving the Chrome OS team that I became interested in health. I come from a healthcare background. My family, I have a lot of physicians in the family, and
Cool.
psychology is a field of medicine. So I really liked Google's culture, Google's growth mindset, emphasis on innovation, and the fundamental goal of organizing the world's information and making it useful for other people. And I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be awesome if the healthcare industry had more of that? So I started looking for teams at Google working in the healthcare space. There were teams in Google Search who were working on features, and there was Verily, the alphabet company that was really spinning up R&D efforts and innovation. But at the time, I think it was 2015, 2016, there wasn't an obvious role. There wasn't a good match, between the kinds of roles that they were hiring for and what I was looking for. So I did something else for a few years. I worked on a learning and development program in Google's internal IT department, but I kept in touch with some of the people that I met and talked to during that exploration process. And a few years in, one of those people reached back out to me and said, hey, I think you should check out this role. Might be interesting for you on a healthcare team in this space. And I did that. It was for data de-identification project. Google was trying to figure out
Cool.
a scalable way to remove identifying information from healthcare data sets so that those data sets could be used to train machine learning models and other things. And they wanted to do that in a privacy preserving way. So I was assigned the job of working with the engineers who were working on those models to build them and then commercialize them through the Google's cloud platform.
It's awesome. And tie into actually my last job before working at the council at Komodo Health, where we worked with the identified patient level data, created a healthcare data insights platform similar, right? Like you have all this amazingly rich healthcare data, especially on the claims side, that can give you a lot of insights into different patient journeys, into kind of like where certain diseases are from a geographic perspective, even predictive as well, depending on, the patient history and things like that. So yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that we had this common kind of like thread in our prior careers.
Yeah, it was great. Similar to when I was on the Chrome OS team and the information security team, I worked with a group of really smart subject matter experts, right? Engineers that knew the models really well, knew data really well. It was actually a team in Israel that was tasked with building the models. So I traveled to Israel to meet them in their context.
So would love to dive in a little bit into kind of like when the systems are not working. Because obviously there's always going to be bugs that come up, systems will break, it's never perfect. What's your playbook for diagnosing the root cause versus just patching the symptoms? How did you think about that at your time at Google?
Always asking and starting with, asking a lot of questions. So I'm a big believer in understanding before acting, especially in a complex situation, right? If you're working with a technical product, there's complexity there. If you're working with people, there's complexity there. So I start by trying to understand what the problem is and how that problem is related to its context and things upstream from it or downstream from it. I think that is really the essence of systems thinking, problem solving in context and with a view to inputs and outputs and dependencies around it. I think if you are an operator or an action figure, there's a tendency to do and do more, right? And scale that way. But if you don't understand what a problem is or how it's related to things, you may end up not solving the problem, number one. Number two, you may end up solving it superficially, or you may end up making things worse to teams or systems around you. So I start with a desire to understand and asking questions, trying to do that in a way that isn't threatening, so that folks the people who are involved can be open, right, with sharing information. And then from there, once you have the data, this is where the psychologist, scientist in me comes in again. Then I try to start isolating the variables to understand what the source of the problem is. And once you have isolated the variable and you have a good sense for what the issue is, then you can design a solution that you pilot, especially if you're working in a large complex system. And once you know that it works in a smaller form, you can scale it across the enterprise or across the whole system, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And double clicking on that, how did you try to remove like your own personal bias like from that? Because I feel like sometimes when you're, at least it was the case for me, sometimes when you're going in with like the problem or you see the problem, you kind of suspect what the issue is. And sometimes I remember my manager would be like, oh, it's probably this. And so, you kind of already get that in your head. But I would imagine sometimes the root cause is actually what you don't expect it to be. So how did you think about that?
When I come in to look at a problem, I may have a hypothesis about what the issue is, but I really try to hold it lightly. My experience working in a variety of areas with a variety of teams has helped me not hone in too early into one area or one problem. And my generalist experience is really key to being able to hold out. Everybody has biases, right? My bias is in the hypothesis, but I think I'm really inclined, given my experience, to look at the big picture first and then hone into what the data, what the information underneath is telling me.
And just totally switching gears here too. You've spent some time on, I believe, both coasts, and you spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, and now you're in Bentonville, Arkansas. So how did that happen? And tell us a little bit about Bentonville, because you and I met there, and I was pretty impressed with it's like a little small town with a lot of really exciting things going on. And I think a lot of our listeners probably don't know what's happening in Bentonville, but I think for startups, it's really important to know about. So would love for you to just kind of share how you ended up there, what's going on there, and how it's kind of shifted your perspective on where opportunities are at.
Yes. So much as my kind of career at Google meandered from team to team, where I've lived has meandered across the country. We ended up in Bentonville in 2017 because my husband's job is affiliated with Walmart, and Walmart, the world's largest company, Fortune 1 company, is headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas. I didn't know this before my husband had the opportunity to work with Walmart here, as I think most people who haven't gone to business school and done a Walmart case study don't. Um, but what is here is a small but mighty group of companies and people who have been innovating in some really essential industries for a really long time. So Walmart in retail, and JB Hunt is here, their logistics and trucking, and Tyson, the chicken poultry company. So what I have really come to appreciate here is that success at scale and greatness is not limited to people and companies working on the coasts. Greatness and scale and success can come from anywhere in the country. And I find that really encouraging and really motivating. There is a bias, I think, right, to think that you can only do a startup in San Francisco, or you can only do work in finance in New York. And yes, that is where a lot of those types of activities happen. That is where a lot of people go to get experience and get trained. But Walmart started out as a small group of stores that then grew over the course of decades into what it is today. I mean, that's innovation, right? In a different industry, in a different area. And so it really is, I think, dependent on one's mindset and approach to solving problems and goals. And here there is a relentless focus at Walmart on lower prices for the consumer so that they can use their savings elsewhere in their lives.
Yeah. I love that. As somebody from the Midwest, it is encouraging to hear and see these opportunities happening in other places. And I think often people forget when you're in a bubble like Silicon Valley, you're like, it's all about tech. The only way that you can be successful is by building a software startup. But we forget that all of our essential industries, you have, Fortune 100 companies in all of those sectors like agriculture, consumer products and, manufacturing, et cetera. And we forget that these places exist all across the country. And there's been incredible businesses built everywhere. And I think it's an opportunity for tech companies to actually bear hug those areas too and, figure out how to get involved. So we, as you know, at the Council Fund have portfolio companies across the United States, despite being based in San Francisco for this exact reason, because often it's good to be close to your customers like Walmart and Tyson and JB Hunt. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
And you talked also about personal approach. So I would love to hear kind of your personal approach. Is there a mindset or value that helps you stay grounded, especially, when thinking about the fact that you've worked at Google and spent so many years operating at scale?
So, especially now in my career, I think this was less so true for me earlier on, but now I really look for routine and rhythm. And I think now it's also more rhythm than routine. Routine, I think, implies you do the same thing over and over again, nothing changes. Rhythm has this feeling that you can be a little bit more flexible, but I really find grounding in doing the same sorts of things at the same time. And the routine or the rhythm might last a week, it might last a year. And for a planner, operator, organizer like me, it can be frustrating when a routine or rhythm is short, right? I like predictability. I like being able to come back and find my cheese in the same place where I left it. But in a world where lots is changing, and especially in technology with the advent of LLMs and AI, and my personal life, right? I'm married, I have 3 kids, the kids are growing and their needs are changing. There's a lot of complexity and so much is out of my control that I've come to accept that my rhythm, I may only have a rhythm for a short period of time, but as long as I have it and as long as it gives me the grounding, it is useful. And as soon as something changes, I can change my rhythm to re-get that grounding.
And
So
I love
a
that
lot of the control
distinction.
comes, pardon?
I love that distinction too between like
Yeah.
the rhythm and routine. I think
Yes.
it's nuanced, but definitely it is different. It's not the
Yes.
same.
Yes. And it's easy, it's slightly easier to control kind of the personal life sometimes as opposed to the professional, right? When you exercise, how you exercise, as an example, what you eat, when you eat. So I try to do that, put that in its container with its own rhythm. And then when I think about what I do kind of professionally, it makes that chaos or that ambiguity a little bit easier to handle.
Yep. And you now sit on several boards and advise founders as well. What kind of excites you about this new chapter of helping early stage builders?
So I feel I'm really excited because I can see the impact that I can have on these small growing companies come directly from the experience I've had at Google and the lessons that I've had at Google. And this is the sharpest that I've been able to see that as I reflect on my career or interview for other jobs. I really feel like the previous 17 years have come together and allowed me to serve these organizations in a different way. So each of the organizations I work with is different. They have different goals, but they're all very mission driven. They're all led by smart people, all scrappy and trying to achieve their mission with limited resources. So they need to be careful about how they do things. They need to be organized so there isn't any waste. And the way I think and operate and help them see both the bigger picture and hone in on problems and isolate the potential root causes, I can see how I can do that. And not being kind of tied to anyone allows me as a person to have a different kind of impact, a scaled impact that I wasn't expecting at this point in my career.
That's super exciting. And what's something that you've learned from founders lately? Is there anything that's changed how you think about building systems or leadership?
Founders have taught me that I can be an investor. So I think, like many women, I never thought of myself as an investor, even though I, had savings bonds that my grandparents gave me, which is a type of investment, have 401k that's invested in the stock market. But it was here in Bentonville and working with some women founders who were trying to solve problems in women's health through technology that helped made me realize that I'm able to do that. I am not a fund, I'm an angel investor, but the work that I did at Google and the way that I was able to manage money and save money has enabled me to redirect some of it to these other areas, right? The same way that other people invested in me as an individual, whether through scholarships or through tuition payments. That was the type of investment in me. And now I feel very fortunate that I'm able to do that for other women. And together, right, our missions align to solve the problems that their companies care about. And that's very needed, right?
Yep. All right, awesome. Well, we're going to move into rapid fire questions. So say the first thing that comes to mind, and we'll just go quickly between me and Rachel. So first one is, as you know, we love first builders, and we consider you to be a first builder because you join a company before there are really playbooks for what you're about to do, and you help build processes and systems and products from scratch. So what do you think the most underrated skill is for a first builder that's having to come in and do that?
It's an appreciation for operations and implementation as a strategic function. I think very often it's considered an afterthought or secondary to the idea, but it really is an equal partner.
Totally.
You're speaking our language. We're both
Yeah.
ops people, so we
You're
love it.
strategy is nothing without the execution, right? That's
That's
like
right.
always.
Anyone can have an idea.
Totally. Totally. What's one tool or framework you rely on every day?
My calendar.
Oh,
My
Yes,
calendar is a
same.
place where I track where I need to be, who I'm going to be with, if I need to bring anything. And as I often tell my husband, if it's not in the calendar, it's not happening.
yes.
It's not real. It's not real at all. Yeah, awesome. What's a book or podcast or mentor that shaped how you lead?
The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. It is a book that essentially a framework for bringing people together to get things done. And you can use it for planning a wedding, or you can use it for running a board meeting or a team meeting. It focuses you on the purpose that you're gathering the people for, from which everything follows. Form, location, methods come from that. But it's brilliant,
Yes,
very well written, and lots of good stories in there.
Added to my list.
me too. I've always heard good things about it, so now's the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. What's one belief that you hold strongly and maybe even controversially about building systems at scale?
Operations isn't an afterthought, right? That
Yeah.
that it's easy. It's not easy. Operations is
That's a
hard.
really good one.
Operations is very hard, and not everybody can do it, and it should be honored and respected in the same way that strategic thinking and vision is honored and respected.
Absolutely. And what's one thing you used to believe about leadership that you no longer do?
That managing people is essential for leadership. In other words, that the two are the
Yeah.
same. Leadership is not the same as management, and you don't need to manage people to be a leader.
Yep. That's
Totally
a really good
agree.
one. In some ways, it's harder to get things done and figure out how to be a good leader when you don't have direct control over people. So, yeah, I hear you. Awesome. Lina, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people follow your work and learn more about your advisory projects?
LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you as an early, supporter of the council and on the podcast today.
I'm excited to follow your journey and be part of it.
Yeah.
It's such a great conversation. Amber, what stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the point that she made a couple times about operations being strategic to think about as a growing company was really interesting. Having been in operations roles in the past and inside of orgs and in program manager roles, I found it's often the last team to get pulled in, and then sometimes the first team that gets blamed when something goes wrong. It's kind of like being like the kicker in a football game or the goalie or something like that, where it's like no one's thinking about it, and then when you get it
Until
wrong,
it
everybody's
happens.
paying
Yeah.
attention. And I think as companies are scaling too, I think we agree that most companies only need like a CEO and a CTO, maybe a product person in the early days, but there comes a point where you need an operational thinker. And if it isn't one of those three people, somebody's going to have to come in and make sure that things are organized. Otherwise, they may get to it too late and have a lot of internal culture issues when it is time to really get organized and scale. So I thought that was really interesting. She brought that up, and that it should be respected, because you see a lot of this stuff like all you need is software, all you need is engineers, everything else is noise. And I think it's fairly low humility to say that, and not really realistic, as you've seen companies scaling from the inside.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really meant what I said earlier of just how like it is all about the execution. And there's no good strategy without the execution that really follows it as well. And so you really need that ops. And we see it even in our own portfolio companies. Like I think about Rosarium Health that has basically this three-sided marketplace with contractors, with the clinicians, and then of course like the health plan customers, and really thinking about like the operations around that. Or Resilient Health, right? I know Donish always talks about Jeff, like really kind of being that yin to his yang, and like, focus so much on the operations to ensure the complexity of what they're building over at Resilient with the different cloud clinics. And again, also like, ensuring that, the patients are getting that full experience that they need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. I think we see this all over, essential industries as we're investing, like even in manufacturing, for example. Even if you're building software for manufacturing, you have to understand that operation. You have to understand how to sell into those customers. There's a lot of organization that's going to go into it, and complexity. So I think particularly for us, as we're investing in software that's built for the physical world often, that's really important to take into account. Like, can these founders really handle it? And I do remember when I was reviewing the deal for Resilient Health, one of the things that got me excited actually was how organized their data room was. And now knowing them, I'm like, that was all Jeff
Makes
Danish.
sense.
He's always talking about how Jeff is so organized. So it was like, thank goodness there was somebody there from the early days, because it was going to be complicated as they built, and they could have totally tripped over themselves and spent money the wrong way, and the rest would have been history. But they made it past those early days because of that organization. So yeah, totally agree.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review, share it with a friend, and subscribe to First Builders wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to also subscribe to the Council newsletter for more founder stories and frameworks you can apply to your own company. We're linking it below.
See you soon.